Okay, give me just a second here. Pop out chat. And let me put this over here. And good morning. Yeah, I probably won't have anyone watching this particular broadcast today because it's the very first one, and, well, most people don't show up at the very first broadcast of anything unless they've heard about it, which this is kind of random. Anyway, today we're going to talk about old school gaming in general and why I think that I am allowed to talk as an old school gamer. First of all, we are mostly going to be discussing tabletop gaming, especially role-playing, such as Dungeons and Dragons and other game systems. There might be some discussion about tabletop war games, and there might be some discussion about video games. But as for why I consider myself old school, well, first of all, as of today, it is August 12th. In just a little over 3 months, I turned 50. Yeah. What's more amazing, though, is that I'm a second-generation gamer. My father actually had the opportunity to start playing in the original Dungeons and Dragons supplements for Chainmail. Anyway, so I was aware of tabletop games from about 1980 or so. And there were certain comic shops that I would go to as a 10 or 11-year-old kid that included books for gaming, miniatures, that sort of thing. And eventually, one year my parents were divorced when I was about 3. And so he would come by to visit every so often, but didn't live with us. Anyway, he came by for a visit, and he handed my brother and I plastic clamshell cases. One of them said Car Wars, one of them said Sunday Driver, and to this day I don't remember who was handed which one. Sunday Driver was a supplement for Car Wars. Car Wars is what if Death Race 2000 had guns on every car and armor, and you were fighting over all sorts of different purposes. You had electric cars, but you were still fighting over oil. It's an excuse to have guns on cars, and then later school buses and tractor trailers with big guns, spinal mounted tank cannons and things. So Steve Jackson Games made it, and if you've ever seen these versions, they are literally typing paper folded in half and stapled to make the rule book. The road sections are paper. There were cardboard counters for the vehicles and pedestrians, aka popcorn. But in general, it was mostly just typing paper. I believe it included 1 die in each set. I may be wrong. It may have been 2 or 3, but they were small. And shortly after that, after having been hooked, I got a hold in my grubby little hands the box set, D&D Basic Set. This was technically after Advanced D&D came out, but go figure, the Basic Set was everything you needed. At the time, I also did not know that Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was a totally different rule set from Basic. I mean, everyone's familiar with what Advanced D&D is like. Even you may have even had a chance to look through the old school, but not everyone remembers that in Basic, there was no difference between your character class and your character race. Every elf was a fighter mage. Every dwarf was a fighter. Every halfling was a fighter thief. Only humans could be fighter, cleric, rogue, wizard, or magic user. And it got even simpler than that. Whereas in Advanced D&D, in the original Player's Handbook, there were like 30 different kinds of polearms. Like, what's the difference between a glaive and a glaive guisarme? Well, I later learned, but back then, the game stats were different. There was short sword, long sword, broadsword, great sword. In basic, you had sword and great sword. You had polearm. Much simplified, and it included the now legendary book Keep on the Borderlands. And I remember I didn't actually play the game until almost a year later. But by that point, I had lost count of how many characters I'd made. And I realized that it only went up to, I think it was either 4th or 5th level. And somebody showed me their Player's Handbook. The first thing I noticed was the immense number of spells in the back of the book. It's like, oh, bling. Yes, bling. And at this point, I ended up never going back. By the way, this is Shinju. She's also an old school kitty. She's 13. Anyway. So, shortly after that, I started to branch out into other game systems. The group I was with started trying almost every game under the sun. And I played a lot of them. I can honestly say that right now, I could not, off the top of my head, list every game that I have played at least one session of. Because there's too many, and I will have forgotten 1 or 2 or 10 or 20. But back then, the most common games that we played, of course, Dungeons and Dragons. We very quickly abandoned the basic set because we didn't like the progression of the box sets. Basic, expert, all the way up to the Immortals. No, like Advanced D&D. Bam, that's all there is to it. We played a little bit of Gamma World and abandoned it quickly. Top Secret, Boot Hill, we ignored. We then played the Palladium Robotech game, one of the first licensed property role-playing games. And from there, we then tried out a couple other game systems from different companies. We played the TSR Marvel Heroes game, played the Mayfair DC Heroes game. Tried Champions. We actually didn't like it too much because it was too much math for the creation of the character, and it was too ordered and structured. It didn't have the dynamic feel of a comic book page to us. And then we moved on to all sorts of games. I've seen the start of the Satanic Panic. I played under the Satanic Panic. I've seen the rise of the, well, I guess we could call it the goth gamer movement with Vampire the Masquerade and all of the other World of Darkness games. I saw the start of the Second Renaissance, you could say, with open gaming license and the proliferation of all sorts of games using the D20 system, including those that really didn't need to. And most recently, the rise of the Matt Mercer effect, and the changes that it and 5th edition have made upon gaming in general. So, what I'm probably going to be doing with this show in the future is I'm going to be, well, taking some episodes and talking about some of the older game systems. No, don't do that. This is Ralph. Talking about some of the older game systems, like the old superhero game systems, like the infamous Rollmaster. Talk about systems that should have succeeded but failed, and systems that should have failed but succeeded. And then, just in general, talking about games, the difference between gaming back then and gaming now. Maybe even bring up some stories from back then, and some of the things that we did as crazy young teenagers and utterly insane old folks. Yeah. The kind of things that got me banned from ever playing a trickster priest in one particular gaming group I'm in. That sort of thing. So, I'm going to go ahead and call it a broadcast for now. This was mostly just as an intro to the channel. And next time I decide to pop on, I'll probably have some decent little stories for you. So I'm going to hold up my hand. This is so I can see if I've caught up to the mandatory lag that YouTube puts on these live broadcasts. And I'm going to count from 5 to 1. When I get to 1, I'm going to say something, who knows what, and then go, and when I go see on the screen, then I'm going to log out. So that's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When I say I'm an old gamer, I really mean I'm an old gamer.